Today's notes are on dividing polynomials, and to do that, we're going to use a process called synthetic division. Now, the first thing I want to make sure you guys understand, when you're dividing polynomials using synthetic division, the first polynomial can be absolutely any size. It can be very small, or it can be a big, long one with a whole bunch of terms. But the second one has very specific rules. It has to be what we call a linear binomial. Now, what that means, binomial means two terms, so the second one can only have two parts to it. And linear means x to the first power. It means no exponents. You can't have an x squared, an x cubed, anything like that. So in order to do synthetic division, you have to be dividing by something like x plus 5 or 7x minus 3. Those are examples of linear binomials. All right, so here's what your question is going to look like. It could be written actually as a division problem. So you have one polynomial, the big one, divided by, and then we have a linear binomial, x minus 5. But the question can also be written as a fraction, because fractions mean divide. So if you have one polynomial over another one, that's the exact same question. So once you realize you want to do synthetic division, here's how you would set it up. Let's say we wanted to do this question right here. So we're going to start off with this shape. It's kind of like an elongated L shape. And we're going to use the numbers from the question to fill it in. So the first thing I want you to do when you write out that L shape, make sure you leave enough space for two rows of numbers inside the L. And then for that top row of numbers, we're going to use the coefficients of the first polynomial. So I would do this. Since I had x cubed, or 1x cubed, I put a 1 first. Then we had minus 4x, so I put a minus 4. Minus 4x squared. Then we had plus 7x, so I put a positive 7, and then minus 10. Now out front, we're going to use the second polynomial to put that number in, but you have to remember to change the sign. So as in my question, since I was dividing by x minus 5, I actually put a positive 5 there. So what we're going to do, we're going to follow this zigzag pattern where every time you're working your way down in the question, you add. And every time you're working your way back up, you multiply by the number out front. In this case, it's a positive 5. So it's down, back up, down, back up, down, back up, and down. So basically, it would work kind of like this. You'd start with the 1. The 1 would just kind of come down. And then it would be multiply by 5 and add, multiply by 5 and add, multiply by 5 and add. It's actually a pretty quick, simple question once you get used to it. Now what happens is after you've done that, the third row of numbers, the one that's underneath your L shape, that gives you the coefficients of the answer to the question. All you have to do is lower each power of x by 1. So let's do this question for an example. We are going to divide x cubed plus 8x squared plus 11x minus 12 by x plus 3. So I'm going to set up the question. I'm going to draw in that L shape. And I'm going to put my numbers in. I have a 1x cubed, 8x squared, positive 11x, and minus 12. And then since I'm dividing by x plus 3, I'm going to change the sign and put a negative 3 right here. So what I do, really what happens, this first number basically just drops down. You're adding, but it's 1 plus nothing equals 1. And then remember, every time I want to jump back up, I'm multiplying. So it's negative 3 times 1 equals negative 3. And then I add. 8 plus negative 3 is 5. And then I multiply again. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. And then I add. 11 minus 15 is negative 4. And then I have negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. And I add negative 12 plus 12 is 0. Now, since my question started with an x cubed, my answer starts with an x squared. It always starts one lower. And then basically you work your way down. If this is x squared, then this represents x to the first power, or just x. This number represents your constant term with no x on it, and this 0, if we got a number for it, would be our remainder, which we'll talk more about later. So basically, the answer to the question is 1x squared plus 5x minus 4.